Okay, we've opened up the line. It sounds like there might be a little bit of an echo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Letitia Brown. I am the Ambassador for Women's Entrepreneurship Day Ghana and Regional Coordinator for Africa. Today's discussion, how to plan a transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, is in celebration of Women's Entrepreneurship Day, which took place on Saturday. We're celebrating in over 144 countries around the world, and the initiative was basically designed in support of women in business, to empower women and to celebrate women in business. I'm going to hand over to Taiwo at Intelligent Capital, and she'll lead with the interview with Ruka.
Great. So thank you, Letitia. I'm Taiwo Jai, and as Letitia said, I am here on behalf of Intelligent Capital and happy to have the pleasure of hosting Ruka Sanusi, founder of Alden's Lane, for our discussion today about how to plan your transition from corporate to entrepreneurship. So we will structure the discussion, but I'll just share a little bit of an overview about Intelligent Capital, and then we'll go into the first part of the discussion with Ruka. I'll ask her a few questions to get us started, and then we'll open up the conversation for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to type them into the conversation box there, or you can, if you received the email from my colleague Nikki, you can send Nikki an email, or you can also email me, Taiwo at intelligentcapitalgroup.com, and we'll go through the questions. This webinar will be recorded, so if you aren't able to join us live today, we can send you out a link to the replay and you can watch it then. So very quickly on Intelligent Capital. Intelligent Capital is an initiative that we have started to take a more integrated approach to providing support for entrepreneurs. I've been working in entrepreneurship support coaching and training for several years, as has Letitia in different capacities. And what we observed was that there were several gaps that were not really being addressed, and so entrepreneurs weren't getting really comprehensive support. So we focused on 4 different approaches. The first is around human capital, which is related to the topic of the discussion today. And it's all around helping to attract potential entrepreneurs who have the skills and the networks and the ability to develop and scale high-impact businesses. So there's a question about how do you help more mid-career professionals or professionals in general to move from the corporate world to the entrepreneurship space is one of the major drivers of our approach in increasing the quality of human capital in the entrepreneurship space. The other 3 components are financial capital, which is around helping to attract more support for early stage investment for entrepreneurs. Intellectual capital, which is around helping to provide insights about market opportunities so that entrepreneurs can be more strategic about where they set up their businesses. And the last one is around social capital, which is increasing the connections and networks between different players in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So this initiative that we're launching today is part of a webinar series. There will be other conversations in line with this theme, and we're excited to have you join us on this first one. So with that said, I'll transition then to our discussion for today. So as I said, we have the pleasure of having Ruka Sanusi with us today. And we're talking today about how to plan your transition from corporate to entrepreneurship. So Ruka has founded the company Alden's Lane, which she started after a decades-long career in the corporate world. And so we're going to be talking about Ruka's experience with her own transition, but also advice that she has for other entrepreneurs. So Ruka, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Nice to be here.
Great. So to get started then, the first question that I have for you is, After having spent time in the corporate world with all of the benefits that come from, working in a prestigious company, what made you decide to set up your own company? So why did you decide to set up Alden's Lane?
Okay, I think I will just answer that by saying that I actually didn't plan this life. I didn't plan to be an entrepreneur. I planned a fabulous international career being paid by somebody else. And the way this happened was actually by chance because during the course of my work, I was providing a lot of pro bono support to friends and relatives who had their own business. And I guess 2 or 3 years in doing that, I realized that there was a gap because the people that were coming to me were actually professional women who worked in the corporate sector themselves and were very au fait with the corporate world and best practice and thought leadership and doing things in a particular way. They then left the corporate world to set up their own business, but they couldn't access business advisory services because it was just very expensive to go to the big four or the big five. And they would come to me and say, I need this strategy. Can you help me to just work out this? And as I did that, I enjoyed it, thoroughly helping others. And I guess I had reached a stage in my own career where I really didn't see that I could grow much more where I was. Not even grow in terms of, hierarchy, but because there was room to move up, but I really couldn't grow in terms of personal fulfillment. And I just saw this as an opportunity that there was a gap. And, many people that I've actually worked with on a pro bono basis were very complimentary of the support that I've given them and how much it's really helped them structure their business. And they encouraged me to do more of it. And I really that's how it started.
Great. So the unintended or unplanned entrepreneur, as opposed to the one who kind of has been thinking about this for years. So that leads us to one of the first questions, which I think a lot of people will be interested to hear your perspective on. So, once you decided that you were going to take advantage of this opportunity to set up your own business, how did you go about planning for that transition? Did you just sort of wake up one day and say, okay, I'm done? Or did you set yourself a timeline? But how did you go about planning that transition?
I didn't wake up and just say I'm done. I thoroughly planned it. From actually planning and documenting what it is that I wanted to achieve with the brand. So normal, 101, the vision, the mission, the objectives. That's just, we take that for granted. But then I actually went on to design what my operational model would be. Right? So we're saying that, business advisory services, executive and business coaching. So starting with the business coaching and executive coaching, what would the operational model look like? What is your, our menu of services, right? And what would each menu look like? What are the events that we would run, right? How often we run them? Who would we expect to come, right?
Right.
And any things that, we would do in just one country or in multiple countries. So I actually spent a lot of time planning the menu of services. Right now we have, particular business coaching, we have 4. So for each menu, where in the trajectory of entrepreneurship you are determines which menu that we would service you with.
So did you have a complete business plan then formulated before you left? And how long, in terms of sort of number of months, that it took you then to put this together? How long did it take for you to put it together? And what did you have then? Was it an actual business plan, or did you just have it kind of outlined for yourself in a PowerPoint or something?
Yeah. It didn't take me very long to actually write the menu of services. Because the thing is, if you think about it, before I left where I was, I've been working for 20 years in consulting, management consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And, 3 or so years of actually doing pro bono work had sort of like, framed my mind as to what the menus would look like.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually took me just a weekend to document it. But that doesn't mean that it took me a weekend to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Some, in terms of the names of the menus, it has come to me, over, weeks and, weeks before.
Mm-hmm.
So that documentation, it just took the weekend. But it was a frantic weekend because I couldn't stop typing.
Right.
It's like when they write it, says, I couldn't write for 12 months and then suddenly I could write. So the actual documentation sort of like, took a weekend. And what was the other part of your question?
What's that? Okay, so you documented over a weekend, and it sounds like, that you had the ability to do that because you had been thinking about it and sort of working pro bono on it for a while, so it had sort of been formulating in your mind. So you documented it over a weekend, and then, once you made that decision, how long did you give yourself before you actually kind of submitted your letter of resignation or gave notice?
Well, it was 2 years after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was 2 years after that. But then you see, the thing is, it's one thing documenting the plan, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
I continue to do pro bono work.
Uh-huh.
And I continue to test the model.
Uh-huh.
So I did pro bono work. I started doing even some of the events, which was, I provided free of charge, but that was my way of testing the market.
Right.
With my target clientele.
Right.
Right?
So if I can just summarize it, it sounded like you've almost had 3 stages of your transition. There was the sort of test it out pro bono, and then there was the document it and really define a model, and then there was the test out the model now that you've defined it over the 2 years before you actually left to go start the business.
Exactly, yeah.
So, just to close up on that, then how did that work for you? And would you advise other people who are thinking about making a decision to do it that way? So, first part is, how do you think that worked for you? And would you advise other people to do it in the same way?
I think it worked very, very well for me because it allowed me to take calculated risks.
Mm-hmm.
And, it allowed me to get a feel for my target clientele. It allowed me to get a feel for what people were willing to pay for the service.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to think about, okay, what a strategic plan would look like. I didn't have a strategic plan. I just had, what I documented was the menu of services and what, the events that we would do and what our services would look like.
Mm-hmm.
After that, and after testing it out, I could then think about, okay, what I want to do in the first 3 years, which is documented in a strategic plan, not anything 20 pages, but five pages, landscape document,
Right. Yep.
joint mission objectives, initiatives, timelines, who's going to do what, which I then presented to a board a year after I had done the initial documentation. So a board of advisors looked at it, criticized it, killed it, and then I had to sort of revise it while implementing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of iteration of getting the feedback from the board as well as from the customers, the clients that you're working with, and then updating it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the second part of that then is would you advise other people to do it the same way?
I think, everybody's risk appetite is different. Everybody's, people work in different sectors, different industries, and some it's good, some it's services.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether there's going to be uniformity in how you execute and how you transition in the detail of it.
Yeah.
But I think what I would say is that, you've got to also test your product or your service before you go full throttle and, go the whole 9 yards into it. It just means that when you actually start, right? Having given up, a salary every 28th or 25th of the month, it means that it just you get a softer landing.
Yeah.
So I would say at least test your product, test your service in the market first, get feedback, know how to price it, listen to your prospective clients, or that category of people that you say are your preferred clientele.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to them, but also because everybody wants to stay in your business.
Yeah.
At the same time, be very careful also who you are talking to.
Right.
One of the people that I actually went to for in terms of like, okay, this is what I want to do, and I see you, as a potential client.
Mm-hmm.
She's actually my first client, and I'm still working with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that really encouraged me because basically somebody that I've seen as a preferred clientele told me from day one, my goodness, this is really what I need.
So you got that early validation.
You realize, okay, I have, with all the testing of the waters, with all of the board and all of that, okay, we did get that target and clientele bit right. But I think for everybody, it might be the transition, the trajectory of the transition
Yep.
will be different.
Yeah.
But I would say you really do need to test the waters and get it right for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a really important point then, just to say, however you need to define it, getting some validation, whether it's getting, one of your dream clients to say, yes, this is what I want, or it's getting your first revenue coming in, or getting a lot of people to sign up to do your program. Set for yourself a milestone and make sure you achieve that milestone in terms of getting some early validation before you actually leave. Just to avoid the inevitable tweaking that you're going to have to do and the kinks you need to work out of your business to get it started. So make sure you have that in place is what I'm hearing you say. Great. So if we transition then to the second big question, which is the money question. So how do you budget for your transition? Did you say to yourself, I'm going to set up my 6 months worth of rainy day funds so I know I can at least cover my basic living expenses for 6 months, and that'll give me enough runway to then be able to get the business to the point where it's generating enough to cover my expenses, and then I can build off of that. Or did you have a bigger number than that? Did you factor in kind of the investment cost for the business as well? So how did you approach the money question, and what was your reference point for how much you wanted to have saved up before you actually left the corporate world?
Okay. I already had a culture of savings personally.
Mm-hmm.
Culture of savings and a culture of investing.
Mm-hmm.
From day one, even when I was in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So I had savings and I had investments, and I guess that also helped me in making my decision.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, I guess I budgeted how much I thought I would need for the first 2 years.
Okay, wow. So
And
not just 6 months, whole 2 years. And when you say how much you thought you would need, did that include the business expenses, or was that your living expenses for 2 years?
Everything, my personal expenses,
mm-hmm.
and the business expenses. And the trick is, everybody, you always think you need less than you actually need.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't do that. So I did budget, and it didn't make it easier to leave.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is that every month I was saving or I was investing, and I knew that maybe for the next 2 years I wouldn't be saving and I wouldn't be investing.
Yeah.
So you can be spending, but you're not saving.
Yeah.
So budgeting is very important.
Mm-hmm.
My savings and my investments help.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great. So it sounds like you had a really big cushion then. So one, just from your own practice of saving and investing before you even decided to go down the entrepreneurship path. And then secondly, in setting yourself a goal of having sort of 2 years worth of savings in the bank before you took the plunge. I'm going to ask you the question then of what advice would you have for other people who are thinking about doing this? Would you suggest they do it the same way, or if not, then sort of if there were maybe 3 questions that you should say people should ask themselves in order to figure out what that number should be for them? So yeah, general advice and what kind of 3 questions would you say people should ask to sort of get a sense of how to plan for the money part?
People often say, you have 6 months of, worth of salary saved up. Others will say have a year. Again, I think it's different for everybody. But I do think it's well worth having a culture, having that cushion. Because whilst you're testing a product or a service, you're not, unless you're very, very, very fortunate, you're not going to have a lot of clients, coming in the beginning. But you will have costs.
Yeah.
Even the cost is, I've never ever had to think about technology. I get into the office, everything works.
Right.
I've never ever had to think about paying a service provider for internet.
Yep.
I have never had to think of certain things that you never need to think about that have been done, for me because I belong to an institution for the last 20 years.
Right.
I haven't think about them.
You have the IT team to worry about that.
So the first, you do need that cushion.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you really it's going to stifle you even more in business. But I think also the thing is, what I would say is that in terms of finances, when you're running the business, you've got to be really, really thrifty with your expenditures, personal and business.
Yeah.
I wasn't really the best sort of financial negotiator when I was in corporate world.
Yeah.
I love I love the technical aspect of my work. I love to talk to clients about what we can do and the technicalities of this and how we can deliver this and it's the best solution for you.
Yep.
And then when it came the financial proposal, okay, this is the price, and then the person is they want to negotiate it down, and I would just freeze because all I want to do is just to deliver. And I didn't really know
how to think about it.
What I wanted to do to the client is, okay, so you want the 20% discount, okay, we'll give it to you. And my boss was like, are you crazy? No. That's not how it's done. But now, goodness gracious, I can negotiate. Hey, I'm so good at it now. Because it's I really do have limited funds. So, and it's amazing how, actually, when you know that you're caught between a rock and a hard place, it's amazing how you just become very, very, almost I want to say aggressive, but then I also want to say assertive. So if between aggressive and assertive, you're like, no, I'm not paying that price. And I was really bad at that personally and business-wise before. But I think in terms of finances, you really have to know how to be really quite thrifty. Don't spend money on things that are not necessary. And I know that is said over and over and over again, but it's really, really true. I was talking to somebody whose parents gave her, I think she had lived in the States and she'd moved to an African city, and she wanted to start a business. Her parents gave her $10,000, and she was like, okay, so this is what I have, and then blah blah blah, and I'm thinking of renting an office, and she wanted to rent an office and
you're thinking, red flag, don't go put money into having a fixed expense.
$8,000 on rent and getting furniture.
Yeah.
So I think really being thrifty and being very, very it's not about your office looking pretty, not in the first couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's not about being in a particular location. Yes, location is important, but really, if the money is coming out of your pocket,
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is that if you're a startup, you actually can't afford it, right? And people see through your business, and they see through you. So if you're going to pretend that you're something that you're not, and also don't forget that the cost of doing your overhead will seep into your fees.
Right.
But
so people are going to walk into your fancy office and think, okay, so that's why she's charging that amount. It's because I'm paying for this fancy office space, when really what they just want is high quality service.
Mm-hmm. You have a fee that you're charging,
mm-hmm.
and it's too high because your overhead is too high.
Yeah.
That's a barrier to entry already.
Right. So if I can just recap, because you've made a couple of really important points here that I want to make sure we don't gloss over. So, the first one is taking the time to really get clear on what your priorities are, so that the things that you are investing in are what are really important, and the other things you can make do without or do more cost effectively, especially in the first few months or years of the business, you get clear on that. So figure out what you really have to invest in, and the things that are just nice trappings that can wait for later, don't go and invest your precious early stage money into right away. That's one of the things that I am hearing you say. And then the second thing is learning how to negotiate, which I think is can be a challenge for a lot of people making that transition from the corporate world, where you may just focus on your day job, which may not include having all those money conversations. But when you are the founder of the business, when it's you driving everything and having those conversations and bringing in the revenue, learning how to negotiate is really critical. And it's generally also one of those things that a lot of women in particular struggle with is learning how to negotiate and have those money conversations. So just on that point, what would you say was the most useful thing for you in learn fire, sink or swim? You better learn how to be comfortable having those money conversations, or were there specific things that helped you get more comfortable and effective at negotiating?
It wasn't anything fancy. It was the fact that I had limited funds.
Yep.
Even in the beginning, 2014, in the beginning, like I said, I had my savings, and
mm-hmm.
I had a budget and all of that. So you come to me, you tell me you want to do a video, I want to do a video, and then you come to me as a service provider, and you tell me it's $800 for a 30-minute video. Because I had the money, I would just say okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have $800 to spend right now on a video.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you want to work with me, I'm telling you what I have.
Yeah.
And I'm giving you a reason to work with me.
Yeah.
Right? So, basically it's not anything fancy. It's what I have.
Yeah.
In terms of finances, it's what I have in terms of my brand.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you want to be aligned with that brand.
Yeah.
And we just take it from there.
Yeah, and so also starting to see the value that you're bringing in creating a brand and in the services that you're offering, and thinking about how other people can recognize that. So great. So I'm going to ask you one last set of questions. And so to the people who are dialed into the call, if you have questions, you can already start typing them into the message box, or sending them by email to Taiwo, that's TAIWO, @intelligencecapitalgroup.com. So where you can start to see your questions and ask Ruka those questions so she can respond to them. So for now, so the last piece I was going to ask you about, Ruka, is about communicating your transition. So, the decision to leave your comfortable corporate job and go out on your own can be something that's not necessarily always met with support, both from obviously your colleagues and the people that you work with in your corporate job, but also from your family and your personal networks as well. So how did you go about? We can start with the family side, since that tends to be the trickier one. How did you go about telling your family and your personal networks that you had made the decision to go start up your own business?
Okay, to start with my family, I'm very close to one of my sisters, and I have a lot of sisters, so let's not go into how many sisters. I'm very close to one of them, so I told her from day one.
Yeah.
Even from that weekend of documentation, told her. My mother didn't know for a year and a half.
Wow.
That I left where I was working. And some of my other siblings also didn't know. I think the thing is, with my mother, I knew that she would just be chronically anxious, and I didn't want to put her under such anxiety.
Yeah.
And with other, siblings, and it was really on a need-to-know basis. Because you've also got to be very, very careful.
Careful in what way?
If you're convicted about something, and people are trying to dissuade you from doing it, it's a demotivator.
Yeah.
So you've got to, even amongst friends and family, you've got to be very careful who you communicate it to. Later on, people may understand it, but in the beginning, I think you really have to have an inner core that you are, talking to.
Yeah.
In terms of, communicating the transitioning to, with colleagues. I mean, to be honest, I think with colleagues, actually around the time that I resigned, I do actually have a job offer from another consulting firm, and I was considering it, but I told them that I needed about 3 months to actually. We were still talking. I said, even if I said yes, it's not going to. I don't want to start another 3 months, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So with my colleagues, when they were asking what you're going to be doing, I said, well, I'm thinking about this, but so let's see. But I just need a break. 22 years of working. I think I want to give myself some time to just think about
my
next steps. But some friends that I was really close to that I thought would actually need the service, I did also communicate the details of avoidance link to them, thinking that these are potential clients and all of that. And people seemed supportive, but I later on found out that their support was only in words, and they actually thought, later on confessed that they thought I was crazy. How do you leave what you were doing to go and set up something? Something to do with women and all this, and that's just like nonsense. And so what I would actually say is that be very careful who you communicate your this transition to, because it's hard enough leaving a comfort zone, but you're leaving that comfort zone and you're surrounded by people who just don't buy into it. It can be the worst thing, because then you start to doubt yourself, and if you start to doubt yourself, you can't actually be a very good service provider to your own clients. Right?
Yeah. So that is really hugely important. It's really starting to be more aware of the impact of the people that you surround yourself with and the conversations that you have, and making sure that you can stay focused on what your vision is and interact with people so that it fuels your passion and helps to catalyze your transition into entrepreneurship, rather than making you either doubt yourself or get demotivated. Great. So we have the first one is so the first one is, you mentioned that you had a few challenges in the first few years of starting up your business. So what would you say has been the biggest challenge in making that transition from working in the corporate world to being an entrepreneur?
The biggest challenge? I think the biggest challenge is actually simple things like, and I mentioned some of this a little bit earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
In the corporate world, you walk into an office
Mm-hmm.
and there's an infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
When you're an entrepreneur, you have to create that infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And creating that infrastructure actually means that sometimes you have to do things that perhaps you're not competent in.
Mm-hmm.
So because you have resource constraints, you can't actually source that competency.
Right.
Right. Let me give you even in terms of finances. Let me give you an example. I remember there used to be a travel agent that I would use for personal travel through one of our administrators.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to go to wherever. I would just book through them.
Mm-hmm.
I would get in those days, we still had tickets printed out. I'll
Right.
get the ticket delivered.
Yeah.
Right. And even without asking, I will get a credit for for the ticket. So basically, I wouldn't have to pay until my return or 30 days after or whatever it is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
You leave that corporate world. Believe me, if you're going to Timbuktu, Kumasi, Abuja, wherever, you pay cash.
Right.
Nobody is going to give you any credit. There's no administrator that's going to go to an institutional body and book your ticket, and they will be as kind as to deliver it to you. Okay? So the biggest thing is actually having to start from day one and build an infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to sound really, really odd, but I had a printer, right, at home that for months I didn't even open the box because I didn't actually want to. I was afraid of working out how to actually connect it to my laptop.
Right.
It's not really silly to you.
So the things you can kind of take for granted when you're in an office with a full team of people to support you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's actually, transitioning from having hands in all areas, administration, technology, finance, people that are taking care of things for you, to actually creating your own finance, your own technology, your own administration.
You become those teams, those support teams in addition to doing your core business. Great. So the next question that we have is, and I just want to take a minute, Ruka, to say thank you again so much for sharing your experiences so openly. I think that this is a lot of the information that people don't necessarily get very easily, and obviously has a big impact on their decision about whether or not to transition. So it's great for us to be able to hear that. So the next question is that beyond obviously there's been some financial sacrifices that you make when you leave having a regular salary, and particularly depending on how far you progress in the company that you work, that could be quite substantial. So that is often a sacrifice that people make, possibly in the short term and maybe even in the longer term. So what would you say have been the biggest sacrifices that you feel you've had to make as an entrepreneur?
Wow, that's a very deep question. What sacrifices have I made? To be honest, I actually don't think I've made any sacrifices. And the reason I say that is this. You see, I needed to be convicted, and I am convicted, that my future is greater than my past. And that was why I left what seemingly was great or good. Because I believe that my future can be better than that. In terms of personal fulfillment, in terms of financial reward, and in terms of giving back to my generation. So I don't actually, I can't lie to you that it's been easy. It hasn't been easy, but it's because of my conviction that I can do what I do. Because even when I feel pain, because perhaps maybe I wasn't able to pay a bill on time, right? I am assured that I'm on the right path. So, and I think that's what, you've got to be sure of, when you want to transition. Because believe me, there's going to be very difficult days. There's going to be great days as well.
Right.
But you see, even when you have great days and, and you are doing an evening with, Yolanda Cuba, Patrick Awua, whatever, you wake up on Monday morning and the challenges that you have to face.
Right.
And do it. Right? So you've got to be convicted of why you're doing it. Because it is your convictions that actually fuel you on that journey. If you're not convicted, don't do it. Because it's going to cost you your time. It's going to cost you energy. It's going to, play with your mind. Because sometimes, you're tempted to think, goodness, this is so hard.
Right.
And thankfully, I've never ever thought I shouldn't have done this.
No regret.
All I thought, no regret, never. All I thought is that, okay, this week I'm feeling pain, but next week, I know that this pain will go away. Anything personally, because I believe that the future is better than yesterday was.
Oh, here's a good one. So, what advice do you wish that you had gotten before you made the decision to leave your job and start your business?
I think the one advice I wish I gotten was that think your expenditures are going to be greater than you ever thought they were going to be.
Right.
But the funny thing is, I remember we had the first board meeting, and there's 7 of us in the room, all women with the exception of one man. And when I presented the financial projections and all of that, everybody else was, really excitable. They looked at the figures and the gentleman was looking and he was smiling. And this is an experienced entrepreneur with, over, 2 or 3 decades of entrepreneur, and of working on his own. And he smiled and he was looking at it and all of that. And I didn't understand that smile until, some time later. Because you can project and project and project. But you see, your assumptions, you have your conditions present, you have your assumptions. The assumptions that you made are relevant for 2014, let's say, if that's your base year.
And then you're talking about the assumptions that go into your business model.
Right? Yeah. Nobody predicted Ebola.
Right.
Nobody predicted the energy crisis.
Yep.
Right? So all of these things shoot up your operations and costs, and it actually also affects your revenue. So I think if anything, I wish I had sort of actually understood clearer that your assumptions need some flexibility, and you perhaps even need to be even more thrifty in your negotiations and be even more thrifty in your expenditures.
Yeah. And sometimes people say you should, whenever you think about setting something up, think that it will take double the time and cost twice as much as you initially estimate. Would you think it's been quite that drastic, or not that significantly off your assumption?
Oh, my assumptions were completely off. completely off. Completely. Because again, who predicted the energy crisis? Who predicted the Nigerian recession? Who predicted the South African recession? Who predicted Ebola? And we wanted to work across in multiple countries. So, and that's the thing. You think, in business, they will say to do a business plan and all of that. And I'm not saying that don't do a business plan, do it, but also just be very much aware that really, the minute you leave that room where you presented a business plan to whoever it is, walk out onto the street, interest rates may have changed.
Yep.
Right?
So it's all about,
monthly inflation has changed.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you adjust your business plan, but you also means that you have to adjust how you're operating. because the assumptions have changed.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is about how quickly you're able to respond to the market. And it really is about mastering the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So that's all, really, really helpful in terms of just mapping out the kind of resilience and agility that you need to have in responding to things that come up, because they will inevitably come up and you can't predict everything, like you said, whether it's got to do with health situations or economic situations, all the different things that can come up that impact your business. So here's another question. So how did you select your advisory board? So, so someone feeling like they need advice about that, but don't know where to start. And, obviously hearing your story, it sounds like your advisory board has played a really important role in helping you just, understand how to respond to some of those challenges and calibrate your own expectations, but also just have a good compass for the direction that you're driving your business in. So how did you go about selecting your advisory board, and what advice would you give for people about how to do that?
Yeah, I think I didn't get it completely right with my advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you why in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I think what people need to look at in forming an advisory board is look at somebody with finance, somebody with HR,
mm-hmm.
right? Maybe even somebody with technology,
mm-hmm.
right? Look for a group of people that can make a whole team.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't look for that initially, right? I think I needed people that I felt I want people that I felt very comfortable with,
mm-hmm.
right? And not necessarily people that had that I could say, okay, in terms of HR, this person is it. In terms of technology, this person is it. Even in terms of women's issues, because if we're saying we want to support women entrepreneurs,
right?
So I for me in choosing my board, and my board have been great. But also the thing is, everybody, you really need to be work with a lot of foresight,
mm-hmm.
right? In thinking that, okay, what are going to be key areas in the next couple of years? What kind of support will I need? Let me take the issue of technology, for instance. When we started,
mm-hmm.
I didn't think about virtual coaching, for instance, or having an app and all of that.
Yeah.
Now there is nobody on my board that has got that expertise. I'm not saying that it means that we can't do it,
mm-hmm.
but now that I'm talking issues of technology and how we can actually transition the business so that we have maybe, for instance, an app or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of interrogating the system that has been developed now, I'm reliant on only the service provider. But I wish that there was somebody that on the board could actually interrogate that system for me,
mm-hmm.
right? So I think what I would say is that look for certain core skills when you're choosing your board. Whether it's HR, whether it's finance, whether it's technology, and choose people who can actually completely challenge you, and that you can be accountable to. Because friends and family is very, very difficult. They may not tell you the truth. They may not want to be completely honest with you. Yeah.
Great. So it sounds like you're saying you've got to balance a bunch of different things. So one, are they people that you can get along with, people that you can actually trust and have open, honest conversations with? The second thing is, do they have the actual skill sets that you need? So covering everything from finance to HR to technology. And if you think about where your business might be heading, also think about bringing some people on early on who can have the kind of perspectives and experience and knowledge to help guide you towards where you want to go. And then it sounds like that other part is making sure that they will actually be able to tell you the tough things and not just say what you want to hear. And that's what makes them different from your friends or your family is them actually being able to have the tough conversations with you. and tell you what you need to know to get your business back on track.
Yes.
Great. Lots and lots of insights here. I'm just really soaking it all up. I feel like we might have to do some cliff notes or write a summary of the tips for people so that they can really take away all of the jewels of information here. So we have time for a few more questions before we wrap up at 8. So let me just tuck over here and see what else is coming up. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So you mentioned that one of the things that motivates you to set up your business is about having an impact, having an impact on your generation, having an impact on women. So how do you strike that balance between impact and income?
There's no balance to strike. I think there's empirical evidence that you can mix profit with purpose. McKinsey's report, I think it was the report came out in August. So, and that's one of many reports that, proves that even like, great brands like, PricewaterhouseCoopers Global in the US, they have a chief purpose officer, right? People, members of staff that are part of senior management, even partners, who are constantly ensuring that, we are aligning our purpose as an organization with how we operate, and we know that can bring us profit. So I think, whilst I'm not saying to everybody, just willy-nilly do anything and say that this is what my heart tells me to do, or, I think we do know now that there are many social entrepreneurs now, and social entrepreneurship is actually very, very popular. But being a social entrepreneur actually, there is a profit. It is profitable to have an enterprise that also serves a social purpose.
Right. So that's not necessarily a trade-off anymore. It can just be a dual objective. Okay, I'm looking at the questions here, and so some of them have been quite focusing on kind of the tough aspects of entrepreneurship, but I think there is that sort of sense that it can be a challenging path. So here's another one that's a little bit on the challenging side, but so people say that running a company is a lonely place. So have you found that to be true for you?
I don't know that I find it to be lonely. I personally, I don't find it lonely. It doesn't mean that I have, people running around me and I'm always in company. No, but the thing is, when you have clarity on what you want to do, I always say that for me, self-mastery and clarity is important for an entrepreneur.
That's great. Those two, self-mastery and clarity. Those are a great combination. Yep. So,
I choose, who I interact with, particularly at the professional level, very, very carefully. And so that when I'm in the presence of, those people, I can talk about business, I can talk about personal, and I can draw from them. I can learn from them. And maybe some of them I may not see on a weekly basis, maybe it's even monthly or quarterly, or the other times it's just on WhatsApp. So, and I think for me, I do a lot of introspection as well. And some people may call that lonely. I don't know, but I get a lot of value from introspection. But after the introspection, then comes certain answers and solutions. I don't find it lonely. I may spend a lot of time alone, but I don't find it lonely.
Great. That's good to know. So for all the people out there who are worried about that, just know that it doesn't necessarily have to be lonely. You get to really create your own experience in a way. And it sounds like a big part of that is who you surround yourself with, but also how you spend your personal time and what kind of thoughts you focus on. So here's another one is, were there any pleasant surprises about the decision to transition? So you talked about some of the things that were sort of challenging discoveries, like how, and how much more difficult it was to do certain things. But were there any things that were pleasant surprises about making the move from the corporate world to being an entrepreneur?
Yes, I mean, very, very many things have been very, pleasantly surprising for me. And I think many of them are actually personal, in the sense that, I have learned so much about myself. I have learned so much about others.
Yeah.
I have learned so much about what it actually takes to run a business. My person has changed because my circumstance has changed, and if I didn't change, it would mean that I actually wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now, better. So I've seen it in a lot of personal transitions. I have grown personally, I believe, and I look at life quite differently. I think I'm a much more patient person now.
Right.
I work in a fast-paced, quite stressful environment where you have to work very tight deadlines or deliver very high-quality work. I'm not saying that I don't deliver to tight deadlines now, but it just means that right now, even in my work, my concern is always really, my focus is always about the client, right? And, I'm interested not just in the transaction of a client relationship, I'm so much more interested in having a transformational relationship for myself and also for the client, so that when I work with them, when I finish working with them, there is a transformation in their mind as an executive, the transformation in their business in terms of how to operate that business. And there's transformation in me because I've also learned about, a new kind of business, maybe, in a different sector of operations, in a different industry, a different size and business. So lots of pleasant surprises, lots of new learning. Pleasant surprises have been some of the really positive feedback about the work. That has been phenomenal, and these are the kind of things that you really hold on to,
right?
Just on the journey. Yeah.
That's so important. What you're just sharing about just the potential for growth, the immense potential for growth when you decide to go out and start something, and you really take things, take the reins on your life, on your career. What it opens up for you in terms of what you can learn about yourself, what you can discover about other people and what their potential is, the breadth of context that you make in interacting with your clients and building the business. I think that is really important to highlight for everyone. It's just all the different ways that you can grow when you decide to make that decision to transition. Great. So we are at the top of the hour. I just wanted to ask you one parting question, which is, what is the last piece of advice that you would share? We've talked about we've talked about things from how you actually plan the transition in terms of timing, in terms of setting up clarity about what it is that you want to do and validating it. We've talked about how to think about the money aspect of it, how much you want to save, and how much to buffer in some extra wiggle room in case your expectations or, when your expectations actually are lower than the reality of how much it costs to transition things. We've also talked about how to think about communicating with your personal networks, with people important to you who are going to be affected by your business and who are going to be caring about how you succeed. But is there any other sort of aspect, or maybe it is one of these aspects and you just want to reiterate it, but one last piece of advice for people who are thinking about making that transition from the corporate world to entrepreneurship, which you've done yourself?
I think the last thing I would say is that the need to see this transition and entrepreneurship as a journey. And it's a journey of learning and it's a journey of growing. The thing is, if you think about a lawyer or an accountant, right? You go to university and you get an LLB, right? you may even decide that you want to do an LLM, right? And then maybe you go to law school, and then you have to go through your article, right?
Before you actually long process, yeah.
Yeah. Before you actually have to work with chambers. Now, many people nowadays, particularly among the younger generations, like, I want to be my own boss. I want to just work for myself and all of that. But there is a rigor to entrepreneurship, and you must be ready to learn, and you mustn't think that you know it all, and now I'm the master of my own universe. Yes, you are, but there's so many things that you can learn from others. So what I would say is be very open to learning, and you can learn in many ways. You can even learn from your staff, from your team. Because in entrepreneurship, a lot of the time you're actually employing people who are smarter than you, right? You're going to learn from your team, from your board. My board have been phenomenal. Learn even from your clients. One thing that the surprising thing is that my listening ability, I listen more to learn, more than anything else. So take it as a journey of learning, and don't assume that you have all of the answers. Yes, you may have specific knowledge and expertise in a particular area. That's why you're an entrepreneur. But know that it's a journey, and during that journey, if you think about Steve Jobs and Apple, look at how they started with the products that they started with. Those products have evolved over the years because they learned. They learned the product, and that's what it is. Also, with you, it's a learning process.
Right. That's a beautiful thought to end on. That it's a journey. It's a bold step to get started. And then there's a lot more that follows after that. There's a lot more learning. There's a lot more growth. And so just having the patience, having the humility to be open to learning from everywhere, from your team, from your clients, from your board, from the everyday experiences, is what really allows you to make the most of the entrepreneurship journey and the entrepreneurship experience. So thank you so much, Ruka. It really has been an absolute pleasure to have you here, and we're so grateful that you are so open and honest about your experience, and also able to reflect on how that works for you, and what to share for other people coming behind you in terms of also making that transition. And for everyone who was able to dial in and join us today, thank you for taking the time on your midweek evening. As I mentioned, this is just the first in a series, so we will have more webinars on this topic and on other topics related to entrepreneurship. And so we will be sending out a link to the replay for this. And if you know of other people who might benefit from this, you can feel free to share it with them as well. And please look out for a note when the next webinar in this series as well. We hope you can join us then too. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. And hopefully you are excited, inspired, and looking forward to making your own journeys in entrepreneurship, or to continue the journeys that you've already started if you've already made the transition. Have a good night. Bye-bye.